I'm a 28-year-old guy, and things with my upcoming wedding are getting complicated. I've been engaged to my amazing fiance for about a year, and we've been planning a small, intimate destination wedding in Hawaii. Afterward, we're supposed to head off for a honeymoon in Italy. I thought everything was going smoothly until my mom threw a curveball at us. I'll start from the beginning because this has spiraled faster than I could have imagined. My fiance and I have always wanted a low-key, intimate wedding, just close friends and family, nothing over the top. The plan was simple: Hawaii for the ceremony, then jet off to Italy for a romantic honeymoon. We were pretty excited, had most of the plans sorted, and it seemed like everything was under control. But, things don't always stay that simple when family's involved. My mom, who's always been super involved in every part of my life, was of course all over the wedding plans. She's the type who checks in on everything, from how I'm doing to whether I've eaten lunch, even though I'm a grown man. It's always framed as her being concerned or just trying to help, but lately she's been taking it to a whole new level. So, my mom's excitement about the wedding wasn't unexpected. At first I thought, okay, cool, she's happy for us. But then, she started to get a little too involved, like every single decision had to go through her. I mean, she was calling me and my fiance multiple times a day, giving her 2 cents on everything from the table settings to the songs we should play at the reception. I tried brushing it off as her just being excited, but it didn't stop. My fiance was starting to get visibly frustrated, and I could tell she was holding back from saying anything outright to avoid causing drama. But I knew we had to put some boundaries in place soon. A few weeks ago, we had a family dinner. Everything was going fine, just some regular pre-wedding chit-chat, when out of nowhere, my mom drops this bomb: "I can't wait for Italy. I've always wanted to visit Florence." I glanced at my fiance, who looked just as stunned as I felt. At first, I laughed it off, thinking she was joking, but her expression didn't change. She was serious. My mom fully expected to join us on our honeymoon. We brushed it off at the time, but in the back of my mind, I knew this was a red flag. Later that night, after everyone had left, my fiance and I talked about it. She wasn't upset, but she was definitely concerned. She said, "Do you think she's serious about this Italy thing?" And honestly, I didn't know. But we agreed that if it came up again, we'd make it clear that the honeymoon was for us, not a family trip. I thought that would be the end of it. Boy, was I wrong. A few days after the dinner, we were finalizing our wedding guest list. We'd already agreed on keeping it small, just close family and friends. But surprise, surprise, my mom started pushing for more people. Distant relatives I hadn't seen in years and friends of hers that I barely knew. She kept saying, "It's a family wedding. Everyone should be invited." It took a firm no from both me and my fiance to finally get her to back off, but not without a bit of tension building. I could tell she wasn't happy about it. Fast forward to the dress fitting. Yeah, I went with my fiance because we're doing this together. My mom tagged along, of course. It's supposed to be a special moment, right? We'll leave it to my mom to try and turn it into a flashback from her own wedding. She starts suggesting changes to my fiance's dress to make it look more like hers from 30 years ago. My fiance was clearly trying to keep her cool, but I could see her frustration. She didn't want to upset my mom, but enough was enough. After the fitting, my fiance told me she was starting to feel like this wasn't even our wedding anymore. Every little decision was being hijacked by my mom. I reassured her that we'd put our foot down on the bigger stuff. Little did I know, things were about to get even more ridiculous. The final straw came last week when my mom casually asked me if we'd booked our honeymoon flights yet. I didn't think much of it until she followed up with, "I was thinking of booking a room nearby, just in case you need anything." I froze. My fiance was standing right there, and we both just stared at her. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I mean, who tries to invite themselves on someone else's honeymoon? When I told her the honeymoon was just for us, she acted like it was no big deal, saying, "I'll stay out of your way, don't worry." That's when I knew we had a real problem. I talked to my fiance later, and she was upset, but more than that, she was tired of my mom trying to take control of everything. I agreed. It was time to have a serious conversation with my mom about boundaries before things got even worse. We knew it wouldn't be easy, but this was our wedding and our honeymoon, and we weren't going to let anyone ruin it. I'm not sure what's going to happen next, but if this is any indication, we've got a rocky road ahead. Stay tuned. Update 1. Hey Reddit, I'm back with an update, and things have gone from bad to worse. If you've been following along, you know that my 28-year-old fiance and I have been planning our wedding, which has turned into a battleground because of my mom's over-involvement. She even tried to invite herself on our honeymoon to Italy. Well, now things have really blown up. In the days leading up to the wedding, my mom didn't let up. We had small family get-togethers to celebrate, and each time, she'd make these snide remarks. Stuff like, some people just don't appreciate their parents anymore, or, I guess not everyone wants their family to be involved in their big day. It was obvious she was taking shots at me and my fiance. I tried to brush it off, but it was clear this wasn't going to go away quietly. We kept reminding her that everything was under control, but no matter what we did, she kept pushing. She would call daily, asking for updates, wanting to know if she could help with one more thing. My fiance and I were already on edge, trying to keep things smooth for the wedding day, but my mom was making it harder than it needed to be. Then came the night before the wedding. After the rehearsal dinner, my mom cornered me when I was alone, tears already welling up in her eyes. She told me how much this wedding meant to her, how this was the last time we'd be close before I got married, and how she really wanted to come to Italy with us to help out. She said it like it was her final plea to spend time with me before everything changed. For a split second, I felt bad, but then reality kicked in. I knew this was just another attempt to guilt trip me into letting her come on the honeymoon. I stayed firm, though. I told her that the honeymoon was for me and my fiancé to enjoy, just the two of us. She looked devastated but nodded, saying she understood. I thought that would be the end of it, but I should have known better. The wedding day arrived, and things were going well, or so I thought. My mom spent most of the day sulking in the background, avoiding any interaction with my fiancé and me. Anytime someone asked her to join a family photo, she'd decline, saying she didn't feel up to it. She was basically giving us the cold shoulder all day. At one point, I tried to pull her aside to talk, but she just brushed me off. It was frustrating, but I was determined not to let her ruin the day. My fiancé noticed what was happening, and after a quiet moment alone during the reception, we decided that once we got on the plane to Italy, we'd stay completely offline. No calls, no texts, no social media, just the two of us. It was the only way we could guarantee a drama-free honeymoon. After the wedding, we had a small brunch planned for the next morning with family and close friends. My mom didn't show up. Instead, she sent me a string of passive-aggressive texts. Stuff like, "I hope you're happy with how you treated me, and you ruined what should have been the perfect day because you were so fixated on excluding me." I didn't respond. I didn't know how to without escalating things even more. That same afternoon, a few of my cousins started sending me screenshots of my mom's Facebook posts. She hadn't mentioned me by name, but it was pretty obvious who she was talking about. Her posts were full of guilt-tripping and vague status updates like it's a shame when family forgets who's always been there for them, and some people only think about themselves on the most important days. It was like she was trying to paint herself as the victim to all our extended family and friends. Honestly, I was too tired to deal with it, so I ignored it. But when I posted an update about the wedding drama on Reddit, the response was overwhelming. People were outraged on my behalf, telling me to stay firm on my boundaries. Some even suggested going low contact for a while, which I seriously started considering. A few days later, we were getting ready to leave for the airport. We'd packed our bags and were excited to finally relax in Italy, far away from all the family drama. We hadn't told anyone the exact details of our flights or where we were staying, just to keep things private. But just as we were about to head out the door, my mom showed up at our house with her suitcase. She didn't knock. She just walked in, all smiles, and said something like, "I'm all packed and ready." Family doesn't leave family behind, right? My fiancé and I were stunned. We hadn't invited her, hadn't told her anything about our trip, and yet, here she was, fully expecting to join us. My fiancé stepped forward and told my mom, as calmly as possible, that she wasn't coming with us. She explained again that this was our honeymoon, just for the two of us, and that we needed this time alone. My mom's expression shifted from fake sweetness to anger in seconds. She accused my fiancé of brainwashing me, saying she had turned me against my own family. Things escalated fast. My mom started yelling, demanding that she come with us, saying she'd never forgive us if we left her behind. She even threatened to cut ties with me if we left her here. It was a full-blown meltdown. Despite her threats, I stayed firm. I told her she couldn't manipulate us into bringing her along, and we left. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, walking out while she was still yelling, but I knew I had to draw the line. We drove to the airport in silence, both of us emotionally drained. As soon as we got to the gate, I updated Reddit again, explaining the latest blowout. The comments were incredibly supportive, reminding me that I'd made the right decision to stand firm. So here we are. We're about to board our flight to Italy, and I'm hoping the next few weeks are nothing but peace and quiet. I'll keep you all updated on how things go, but for now, I'm just relieved we're finally getting away. Update 2. After that exhausting showdown at the airport, we finally arrived in Italy. My fiancé and I had promised each other that we'd go offline and just enjoy our time together, far away from the family drama. For the first couple of days, it was working. We stayed in a beautiful little hotel, went sightseeing, and tried to soak in every moment of our trip. But even though I wasn't checking my phone, I could still feel the weight of everything that had happened. It was hard to completely relax with the argument at the airport playing over in my head. On the third day, I broke down and checked my phone. Sure enough, there were multiple missed calls and texts from my mom. They ranged from guilt-tripping messages about how abandoned she felt to full-blown angry rants about how I was choosing my fiancé over my family. It was exactly what I had expected, but that didn't make it any easier to read. I decided not to respond immediately. I wanted to focus on enjoying our honeymoon, and engaging in another argument was the last thing I needed. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Even though I didn't reply, my mom wasn't done stirring the pot. A day later, I checked the family group chat, and there it was, vague posts about how some people leave their families behind when they get married and don't appreciate all the sacrifices that were made for them. She never mentioned me by name, but it was obvious who she was talking about. To make matters worse, a few family members started messaging me privately, telling me that I should make peace with my mom, and that family is more important than a silly fight. Some even hinted that maybe I should have just let her come on the honeymoon to avoid all this drama. It felt like the pressure was coming from all sides. The constant pressure from my mom and the rest of the family was starting to wear me down. I started questioning myself, maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe letting her come wouldn't have been the end of the world. My fiancé, though, stood firm. She reminded me that this was our time, and rewarding my mom's manipulative behavior would only make things worse in the long run. Still, it was hard not to feel guilty. My mom had always been a big part of my life, and seeing her act like this was tough to process. The more I tried to focus on enjoying Italy, the harder it became. Every time I thought I was finally relaxing, another message or guilt trip from family would pop up, pulling me back into the mess we had tried so hard to escape. It wasn't long before the emotional weight of the situation started affecting the honeymoon itself. We were in one of the most beautiful places in the world, but I couldn't fully enjoy it because of the storm brewing back home. Then, the unthinkable happened. My fiance and I were exploring a small town in Tuscany, having a late afternoon coffee at a quaint little cafe. We were talking about what we wanted to do next when, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her. My mom sitting at another table like it was the most normal thing in the world. My heart sank. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. She had flown all the way to Italy. I sat there, frozen, trying to process how this could even be happening. Before I could figure out what to do, my mom walked over to our table, smiling like she had just run into us by chance. She said she wanted to surprise us and spend some time together as a family. I was completely speechless. My fiancée looked like she was about to explode, but somehow she managed to stay calm. What followed was one of the most uncomfortable conversations I've ever had. My mom acted like everything was fine, but it was clear she expected to spend the rest of our trip with us. She said things like, "I flew all this way just to be with you, and it's not fair that you're cutting me out of your life." As the conversation went on, my mom's tone shifted from cheerful to accusatory. She started raising her voice, accusing me of cutting her off and choosing my wife over my own mother. People in the cafe were starting to stare, and the whole situation was turning into a scene. My fiancé, who had had enough, stood up and told my mom that she had crossed a line. She said that my mom needed to respect our boundaries and leave. My mom didn't take that well at all. She doubled down, saying she flew all this way and just wanted to be part of our lives. She refused to leave. At that moment, I broke down. I told my mom that this was supposed to be our honeymoon, a special time for me and my new wife, and that her constant interference was suffocating. I begged her to understand that this wasn't about excluding her, it was about giving us space as a married couple. That's when my mom pulled out the big guns. She told me that if I really wanted her out of my life, she'd leave, but she would never forgive me for shutting her out. With tears in her eyes, she stormed off, leaving me and my fiancé sitting there, completely drained. After the confrontation, my fiancé and I were left feeling a mix of anger, guilt, and confusion. The whole situation was too much. We had planned this trip to be a celebration of our new life together, but it had turned into a nightmare. We decided to cut our trip short and head back home. We knew this issue with my mom wasn't going to go away on its own, and it needed to be addressed head-on. As soon as we got back to our hotel, I updated Reddit with the shocking news that my mom had followed us to Italy. The response was overwhelming. People were quick to point out how emotionally manipulative my mom's behavior was, and many encouraged me to consider going low or even no contact for my own mental health. I'm not sure what we'll do next, but one thing's for sure, this is far from over. Update 3. After cutting our honeymoon short, we arrived home feeling completely deflated. What was supposed to be a romantic getaway turned into an absolute disaster, thanks to my mom showing up unannounced in Italy. We agreed to give ourselves some time to recover before addressing the family drama, but of course that didn't last long. The first few days back home were quiet. My fiancé and I tried to relax and enjoy the peace, but I could feel the storm brewing in the background. My mom hadn't reached out yet, and I knew that was a bad sign. I started hearing from extended family soon after we got back. Apparently my mom had been working overtime, telling everyone her side of the story. According to her, she was the victim of a cruel son who abandoned his own mother on the happiest day of his life. She conveniently left out the part where she flew to Italy uninvited and tried to hijack our honeymoon. Some relatives reached out, confused and wanting to know what had really happened. It was clear that my mom had twisted the story to make herself look like the poor, mistreated mother who just wanted to be involved. I was frustrated, but not surprised. The fallout was fast. My extended family started splitting down the middle. Some of them sided with me, understanding that my mom had overstepped and recognizing the importance of boundaries. Others, though, sided with her, saying things like family should always come first, and that I was being too harsh. It was tough to see some relatives, who I thought would have my back, completely buy into my mom's narrative. The pressure from that side of the family started to build, with a few even suggesting I apologize to her for the sake of family peace. Things took another turn when my mom showed up at our house unannounced one afternoon. She didn't call ahead, didn't ask if we were available, just showed up at the door like nothing had happened. I was caught off guard, but I let her in, figuring we could finally have a civil conversation. Boy, was I wrong. As soon as she sat down, she started demanding an apology for the way she was treated. She went on about how she felt excluded and disrespected during the whole wedding and honeymoon situation. I tried to explain once again why we had set those boundaries, but she wasn't having it. She refused to acknowledge that she had done anything wrong and insisted that I was the one who needed to learn to respect her. When I suggested that maybe we should go to family therapy to work through our issues, she completely dismissed the idea, saying she didn't need therapy. Apparently, I was the one with the problem. At this point, my fiancé had had enough. She stepped in, reiterating that our marriage comes first and that the boundaries we set were reasonable and necessary. My mom immediately accused her of trying to isolate me from the family, saying that my fiancé was the reason for all this drama. It was ugly. I could see the conversation wasn't going anywhere, so I tried to de-escalate, but my mom wasn't budging. She stormed out of the house, saying she'd wait until I came to my senses. The one surprise in all of this was my dad. He's been mostly silent through all the drama, usually staying on the sidelines and letting my mom do all the talking. But after this latest blow-up, he finally spoke up. He called me privately, told me he understood why I needed to set boundaries, and said that my mom's behavior had gotten out of hand. It was a relief to hear that from him, but he also told me that my mom wasn't going to back down anytime soon. He said he'd keep trying to talk to her, but I could tell that he was in a tough spot himself. I posted another update on Reddit, detailing how my mom refuses to back down and how she's now spreading lies to the family. The support was overwhelming. A lot of people shared similar stories of family drama and toxic parents, and many suggested that I go low contact for a while to protect my mental health and focus on my marriage. The advice made sense. My fiancé and I had been discussing what to do next, and the idea of going low contact seemed like the best option. After a lot of thought, I decided to go low contact with my mom. It wasn't an easy decision, but I knew it was the right one. I sent her a text explaining that I needed space and would reach out when I was ready. I didn't want to completely cut ties, but I couldn't continue to engage in the drama. As expected, her response was explosive. She sent long, emotional messages accusing me of betraying the family and claiming that my fiancé was manipulating me. I didn't respond. I blocked her number for the time being, and for the first time in a while, I felt a sense of relief. The emotional toll was still heavy, but I knew this was the best decision for my well-being and my marriage. It wasn't easy, but I had to protect myself from the constant manipulation. Of course, the fallout continued. Some family members, including a few cousins and aunts, started distancing themselves from me. They were clearly siding with my mom, buying into her version of events. It hurt, but I knew I couldn't control how others saw the situation. Thankfully, I had my fiancé, a few close friends, and a couple of supportive family members who understood why I had to set these boundaries. I also started seeing a therapist to work through the guilt and stress that had built up over the last few months. Once again, Reddit came through with an outpouring of support. People shared their own stories of toxic family dynamics and validated my decision to go low contact. It was comforting to know that I wasn't alone in dealing with this kind of situation. For now, I'm focusing on my marriage and my own mental health. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I'm taking things one day at a time. Thanks again, Reddit, for all the advice and support. I'll keep you posted. Update 4. After everything that's happened with my mom, including her showing up uninvited on our honeymoon and trying to guilt trip me into bringing her back into my life, I decided to go low contact. It's been a few months now, and I've been focusing on healing and growing from the whole situation. Here's how things have unfolded. One of the best decisions I made after going low contact was to start therapy. I realized I had been carrying years of emotional baggage and guilt that my mom had instilled in me, and I needed help unpacking it all. My therapist has been incredible. She's helped me see just how manipulative my mom's behavior had been and how it had shaped the way I saw myself and my relationships. I've learned to set boundaries not just with my mom, but with other people in my life too. The guilt I used to feel about standing up for myself has started to fade, and I'm finally starting to feel like I'm in control of my own life. With the therapist's help, I've gotten more confident in the boundaries I've set with my mom. I used to think that standing up to her would mean losing her forever, but I've come to realize that I deserve to live my own life without constantly worrying about her disapproval. It's been a huge relief to know that I have the right to protect my own happiness, free from her control. It hasn't been easy, but each day I feel a little bit stronger in my decision. I've stopped feeling like I need to justify my choices to anyone, and that's been liberating. Through all of this, my fiancé has been my rock. Our relationship has only gotten stronger since everything went down with my mom. We've had some really tough conversations about family boundaries and what we want our future to look like, but it's brought us closer than ever. He's supported me in every step, and I feel like we're in a better place now than we've ever been. We celebrated our 6-month wedding anniversary recently and spent some time reflecting on how far we've come. Navigating this mess has been challenging, but it's also shown us that we can handle anything together. Out of nowhere, I started getting messages from my younger cousin. She reached out to tell me that my mom had been bad-mouthing me at family events, saying that I had cut her off and disrespected her. My cousin didn't agree with what my mom was doing, and she offered me her support. It was a nice reminder that not everyone in my family had bought into my mom's narrative. But still, more family members began to distance themselves. Some aunts and cousins clearly sided with my mom, believing her story that I had abandoned her. At first, it hurt to see them pulling away, but I resolved not to engage. I can't control how they see the situation, and I won't let it drag me back into the drama. Interestingly, my dad has remained supportive, even though he's still with my mom. He calls every now and then to check in, but he stayed out of the drama for the most part. I get the feeling he knows exactly how my mom is, but he's just not willing to confront her directly. His calls have been a small comfort during all of this. Even though he's trying to stay neutral, knowing that he understands where I'm coming from has made it easier to stay strong in my decisions. After months of low contact, my mom sent me one final guilt-tripping message. It was the classic life is short line, telling me I'd regret losing her one day, and that she was waiting for me to come to my senses. I felt that familiar pang of guilt, but this time, I didn't let it control me. I didn't respond. I've come to realize that every time I engage, it gives her another opportunity to manipulate me. So this time I let it go. No response, no explanation, just silence. Since then, I've started to feel a sense of freedom I haven't experienced in years. Without my mom's constant interference, I've been able to make decisions for myself without worrying about what she might think. I'm more confident in my choices, and I'm finally starting to feel like my life is mine again. As I mentioned earlier, my fiancé and I recently celebrated our 6-month anniversary. It's crazy to think about how much we've gone through in such a short time, but we're stronger for it. We've made a point to focus on our relationship and building a life together without all the noise from outside influences. We both feel like we're in a good place now, and it's nice to finally have some peace. My therapist has been a huge help throughout all of this. She's encouraged me to keep focusing on myself and my relationship, reminding me that healing from toxic family dynamics takes time. It hasn't been an overnight process, but I can see the progress I've made, and that keeps me going. She's also reminded me that it's okay to feel sad about the distance with my family, but that doesn't mean I made the wrong choice. It's all part of the healing process. Surprisingly, a few extended family members who had initially distanced themselves have started reaching out. They've come to understand why I made the decisions I did and have offered their support. It's been nice to reconnect with them, and it's a reminder that not everyone is buying into my mom's narrative. Here's the biggest surprise. After her last guilt-tripping message, my mom went silent. No more dramatic texts, no more unannounced visits. It's like she's finally realized that I'm not going to budge. Part of me wonders if she's just waiting for the next opportunity to strike, but for now, the quiet is a relief. So here we are. Therapy has helped me grow in ways I never expected, and I've built stronger boundaries because of it. My relationship with my husband is better than ever, and despite the family drama, I feel like I'm finally on solid ground. As I look to the future, I feel more optimistic than I have in a long time. The situation with my mom remains unresolved, but that's okay. I've learned that I don't need her approval to be happy. I'm excited to embrace the next chapter of my life without the emotional baggage my mom tried to impose. Update 5. After months of dealing with my mom's manipulation and toxic behavior, I've finally decided to go no contact with her. It's been a huge turning point in my life, and I wanted to share how things have been since then. This will likely be my final update, so here's how everything unfolded. It's been several months since I went low contact with my mom. During that time, I've continued therapy, focused on personal growth, and deepened my relationship with my husband. The space from my mom has brought a level of peace I hadn't experienced in years. No more dramatic texts, no more walking on eggshells. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. But despite the peace, the possibility of future drama still loomed in the background. Even though I was low contact, I knew there was a chance my mom would find a way to reinsert herself into my life. That thought was always in the back of my mind, and it was starting to weigh on me. As time went on, I began to consider going full no contact with my mom. Low contact had helped, but the constant anxiety of when the next outburst might come was still there. I talked it over with my therapist and my husband, and the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I realized that if I really wanted to protect my mental health and live my life on my own terms, I couldn't keep leaving the door open for my mom to push her way back in. It was a tough decision, but I knew it was the right one. Around the same time, my husband got offered a major career opportunity in a different city. It was the perfect timing. The move would put physical distance between us and my family, and it felt like an extra layer of protection. We started making plans for the move, excited about the fresh start in a new place. The idea of leaving behind the constant tension and drama was a huge relief. We'd be able to build a life together without my mom's interference hanging over us. Just when things were starting to feel calm, my mom tried to make her reappearance. Out of the blue, she sent a neutral, almost casual message about the holidays. It was like she was pretending nothing had happened, as if the past few months of drama didn't exist. I felt conflicted for a moment. Part of me wondered if maybe things could go back to normal, but deep down I knew better. This wasn't her reaching out to make amends, it was just another way for her to get back into my life without addressing any of the real issues. I decided not to engage. Every day, without my mom's influence, brought me more confidence. For the first time in a long time, I was living my life on my own terms. I didn't have to second-guess my decisions or worry about how she'd react. It was freeing. I started to realize that my life was my own, not something to be controlled by someone else. In one particularly eye-opening therapy session, I had a breakthrough. I realized that my mom's behavior had never really been about love or wanting the best for me. It had always been about control. That realization brought me an unexpected wave of relief. For so long, I'd been trying to win her approval, thinking that was what I needed to feel happy. But now, I could see that her approval was never going to bring me peace. That moment helped me finally let go of the guilt I'd been carrying. I knew then that I needed to go no contact for good. After a lot of thought, I made the decision to go no contact permanently. I sent one last message to my mom, explaining that for my own mental health and well-being, I needed to step away indefinitely. I didn't go into too much detail, I just kept it simple and direct. Then I blocked her on all platforms. As expected, the reaction was explosive. She bombarded me with angry, accusatory messages, but I didn't see most of them. Blocking her meant I didn't have to engage, and for the first time, I felt like I was truly in control of my own life. My husband, therapist, and a small circle of friends and family have been my support system through all of this. I no longer feel the need for my mom's approval, and I'm content with the life I'm building. The people who matter most to me understand why I made the decisions I did, and they've stood by me every step of the way. Over time, the family drama has started to fade. Without my mom constantly stirring things up, other relatives have started to move on. Some who initially sided with her have quietly shifted back to being neutral or supportive. Others still keep their distance, but I've learned to accept that not everyone will understand my choices, and that's okay. A few months ago, we made the move to the new city. It's been a fresh start in every sense. We've been settling into our new home, exploring the area, and focusing on building a life that feels truly ours. The physical distance from my family has been a huge relief, and it feels like a clean slate. With the drama behind me, I've started rediscovering joy in everyday life. My husband and I go on spontaneous dates, I've picked up new hobbies, and I'm able to focus on my career without the constant distraction of family issues. It's been a long time since I've felt this happy and in control of my life. Peaceful holiday season. The holidays came and went, and for the first time in years, I felt no dread about family gatherings. We spent the season peacefully with close friends and each other, and it was honestly the most relaxing holiday I've ever had. No guilt, no drama, just peace. So here we are. This will probably be my last update. Going no contact with my mom has brought me a level of peace I never thought possible. Therapy has helped me grow and heal, and I've built stronger boundaries than ever before. My relationship with my husband is stronger than it's ever been, and for the first time in a long time, I'm truly excited about the future. As I look forward, I feel empowered, free, and ready to embrace whatever comes next. The journey with my mom has been painful, but I know I made the right decision. I'm ready to live life on my own terms, without the emotional baggage that once held me back. Hi, my name is Ethan. I'm 34 years old, and I work as an elementary school teacher. Teaching has always been my passion. There's something special about shaping young minds and watching their curiosity grow. It keeps me grounded and reminds me of the simple joys in life. I'm married to Ava, my amazing wife, who is 32. Ava is a graphic designer, and she's one of the most creative, kind-hearted people I've ever met. She's the type of person who sees beauty in the smallest things and always makes you feel like you matter. We've been married for 3 years now, and I couldn't imagine my life without her. But if I'm honest, our relationship hasn't been easy, not because of us, but because of my mom. Linda, my mom, is, well, let's just say she's a strong personality. She's 59, and for as long as I can remember, she's had very clear opinions about how life should be lived. Unfortunately, those opinions rarely align with mine. Growing up, my mom was always the one in charge. She had this knack for making sure everyone knew what she thought was best, and somehow, her way always became the only way. She's a traditionalist through and through. Anything that doesn't fit into her idea of how things should be is immediately dismissed. My dad, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. He's quiet and easygoing, sometimes too easygoing. He doesn't stand up to her. He just lets her take the reins to avoid any arguments. I guess, in his mind, peace is more important than being right. But that's not the kind of peace I want in my life. When Ava and I got married, I knew deep down that my mom wouldn't approve. I hoped I was wrong, but I wasn't. Ava's everything my mom doesn't understand. She's a dreamer, an artist, and someone who follows her own path. Mom never said it outright, but I could tell she thought Ava's career as a graphic designer wasn't serious enough. She'd make comments about how it must be nice to have a hobby you can get paid for, or real jobs don't let you work from home. At first, I tried to brush it off, thinking she'd come around, but she never did. The thing is, Ava has always tried to be respectful. She's patient and kind, even when my mom makes snide remarks or gives her those judgmental looks. Ava just smiles and tries to let it roll off her back. I wish I could be that calm about it, but it's hard. It's like every time my mom sees Ava, she has to find something to criticize, whether it's her career, the way she dresses, or even the fact that she doesn't cook the way my mom thinks a wife should. One time early in our marriage, Mom told me, "Ethan, you'll grow out of this phase eventually." She was talking about my marriage, my wife, as if Ava was some kind of trend I'd move on from. I couldn't believe it. Ava didn't hear her say it that time, but I did, and it hurt. I wanted to say something, to defend my wife, but I froze. I kept telling myself I didn't want to start a fight, that maybe if I gave it time, things would get better. But deep down, I knew my mom wasn't going to change unless I stood up to her. For the past 3 years, Ava and I have been doing our best to build a happy life together. We have a cozy apartment filled with little touches of her creativity, paintings she's made, decorations she's designed. It's a space that feels like us. But every time we're around my mom, it's like there's this storm cloud hanging over us. Ava never says it, but I can tell it bothers her. She's always polite to my mom, even when Mom forgets that Ava doesn't eat meat and serves roast chicken every time we visit. Ava will quietly eat the side dishes and smile, pretending it's no big deal, but I see the hurt in her eyes. She doesn't feel welcome, and I can't blame her. I've tried to talk to my mom before, but it's like talking to a brick wall. She always turns it back on me, saying things like, "I'm just trying to help you see what's best," or "You'll thank me one day." It's frustrating because I know she's not listening. She's already decided what she thinks is right, and nothing I say will change her mind. Still, I keep hoping that one day she'll realize how amazing Ava is. I wish she could see what I see, a strong, talented, and compassionate woman who makes me a better person every single day. But so far, all she sees is someone who doesn't fit her idea of the perfect wife. Sometimes I wonder if I've done enough to stand up for Ava. Have I let my mom's behavior go on for too long? Have I been too afraid to rock the boat? I don't want Ava to feel like she's second place in my life, because she's not. She's my partner, my equal, and I know I need to start showing her that more. This is where my story begins. A story about love, family, and learning to set boundaries. It's not an easy journey, but it's one I'm determined to take. For Ava, for myself, and for the future we're building together. The holidays are supposed to be a time for family, love, and celebration, right? At least, that's how I always pictured it growing up. But this past holiday dinner felt more like walking through a minefield. Ava and I arrived at my parents' house with a pie she baked from scratch. She spent hours perfecting it because she wanted to impress everyone. I knew how much effort she put into it, and I couldn't wait for my mom to taste it. We walked in, exchanged the usual awkward hugs, and joined the rest of the family in the dining room. My mom, of course, was in full hostess mode, directing everyone like a conductor leading an orchestra. As soon as Ava handed her the pie, Mom barely glanced at it before saying, "Oh, I've already made dessert, but I suppose this can go on the side." Ava gave her a polite smile, but I could see the flicker of disappointment in her eyes. "You gave Ava still whistles from the doctor? Don't you think your mother should work?" I wanted to say something, but before I could, my mom had already moved on, talking about how much work she'd put into her own dishes. I reminded myself to pick my battles. The dinner started off fine, pleasant enough, at least, but then, as the conversation flowed, my mom decided to share her version of holiday humor. She turned to one of my aunts and, with a laugh, said, "Ethan's little experiment with Ava is sweet, isn't it? Young love is so temporary." I froze. Did she really just say that? I glanced at Ava, who was sitting beside me, her fork paused midair. She didn't say a word. Instead, she leaned toward me and whispered, "It's okay, just let it go." Her voice was steady, but I could tell it wasn't okay. Not really. I should have spoken up. I should have told my mom to stop, but I didn't. Part of me didn't want to ruin the dinner for everyone else, and another part of me just felt stuck. I hated feeling like I had to choose between my wife and my mom, but that's exactly what it felt like. As the weeks went on, things didn't get any easier. Every time we visited my parents, my mom found a new way to push Ava's buttons. She'd forget that Ava doesn't eat meat and serve dishes like roast beef or chicken, saying, "Oh, I completely forgot, but you can just eat the sides, right?" Ava would smile and say it was fine, but I could see how much it hurt her to be overlooked like that. And then there were the ex-girlfriend texts. Yes, you heard that right. My mom somehow reconnected with my high school ex, Sarah, and started forwarding me messages from her. "Sarah was just asking how you were doing," she'd say, acting like it was the most innocent thing in the world. "You two were such a lovely couple. I always thought you'd end up together. I couldn't believe it. Who does that?" I told her to stop, but she just brushed it off, saying, "I'm just keeping in touch. No harm in that." Ava noticed, of course. She always notices. But she never said anything outright. Instead, she started making excuses to skip family events. She'd say she had work to catch up on or wasn't feeling well. At first, I thought she was just tired, but then I realized it was more than that. She was avoiding my mom because being around her was emotionally draining. One evening, Ava and I were sitting on the couch watching TV when she turned to me and said, "Do you think your mom will ever accept me?" I said, the question hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell her yes, that my mom would eventually come around, but deep down I wasn't sure. "I hope so," I said after a long pause. "She just takes time." Ava gave me a small, sad smile. "It's been 3 years, Ethan. How much more time does she need?" That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was failing her. Ava deserved better. Better than my mom's constant criticism and better than me staying silent. I started to wonder if I was doing enough to support her, or if I was just taking the easy way out by avoiding conflict. The thing is, standing up to my mom isn't easy. She has this way of turning everything around, making you feel like you're the one in the wrong. I've tried before, but every time it ends with her saying something like, "I'm just being honest," or "I'm only looking out for you." And somehow, I always end up feeling guilty, like I'm betraying her by questioning her intentions. But now, I'm starting to see the toll it's taking on Ava, and on us. She's quieter these days, less vibrant. It's like the spark that makes her Ava is dimming, and I can't help but feel responsible. I don't want to lose her. She's my wife, my partner, my best friend, and I hate that she's being made to feel like she's not good enough, because she is. She's more than good enough. I know I can't keep putting this off. I need to figure out how to stand up to my mom, not just for Ava, but for us, for the life we're trying to build together. It's scary, and I don't know how it's going to go, but one thing's for sure. I can't keep letting things stay the way they are. Birthdays are supposed to be special, a day where you feel loved and celebrated by the people who matter most. This year, I thought mine would be just that. Ava had planned a small dinner at my parents' house with close family. I could see how much effort she put into everything, from picking out a thoughtful gift to baking a cake that she knew was my favorite. I was looking forward to it, but part of me was anxious. "Coffee?" she asked. "You want a coffee?" I nodded, even though I felt vastly different. For hours, I'd worked at it. My mom had a way of turning even the simplest moments into something complicated. We arrived at the house, and everything seemed normal at first. Mom greeted us with her usual stiff smile, and Dad gave me a warm hug. The table was set, the food was ready, and for a brief moment I thought maybe this would be one of those rare, drama-free evenings. But deep down, I knew better. As dinner went on, I couldn't help but notice the subtle digs my mom was making toward Ava. "Oh, Ava, you didn't bring wine? Ethan used to love that Riesling Sarah always brought over," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Ava just smiled politely, pretending not to notice, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Then came the toast. My mom stood up, glass in hand, and I braced myself. I should have known better than to think this was going to be a simple, happy birthday speech. To my son, she began, smiling warmly at the rest of the table, who has always been so full of potential. I know you'll achieve great things, Ethan, and one day, her eyes darted toward Ava for just a second before looking back at me. One day, you'll find the right person to share your life with. We all make mistakes in our youth, don't we? The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt the blood drain from my face. The room fell silent, and for a moment, I couldn't even look at Ava. When I finally did, she was already pushing back her chair. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice calm but shaky. She walked out of the room, and I heard the bathroom door close a moment later. I turned to my mom, furious. "What the hell was that?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice low, but I could feel the anger rising in my chest. "Oh, relax," she said, waving me off like I was overreacting. "She's so sensitive. I didn't mean anything by it." "That's not an excuse, Mom. You can't keep treating her like this." "Well, I'm just being honest, Ethan," she replied, her tone smug. "You'll thank me one day." I didn't even know how to respond. It felt like talking to a wall. I wanted to say more, to defend Ava right then and there, but I was so angry and overwhelmed that I just sat there, staring at her. A part of me hated myself for not doing more in that moment. After a few minutes, Ava came back to the table. Her face was calm, but her eyes told a different story. She sat quietly for the rest of the dinner, barely touching her food. I could feel the tension between us, thick and heavy, and I knew this wasn't something we could just brush off. When we got home that night, Ava didn't say much at first. She went straight to the kitchen, put the leftover cake she'd brought in the fridge, and sat down at the dining table. I followed her, unsure of what to say or how to start. "I'm sorry," I finally said, breaking the silence. "I should have said something sooner. I should have stopped her." Ava looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mix of hurt and exhaustion. "Ethan," she said softly, "I don't need you to apologize for her. I need you to stand up for me." Her words cut deep. She wasn't yelling, she wasn't angry, she was just tired. "I feel like I don't matter to your family," she continued. "Like I'm just this outsider who's never going to be good enough. And the worst part is, I feel like you're okay with it because you don't want to make waves." "That's not true," I said quickly. "You do matter. To me, you matter more than anything." "Then why don't you show it?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Because right now, it feels like I'm fighting this battle alone." I didn't know what to say. She was right. I had been trying to avoid conflict, telling myself I was keeping the peace, but in reality, I was just making things harder for her. For us. That night, I stayed up long after Ava had gone to bed, replaying everything in my head. I thought about all the times I'd stayed silent when I should have spoken up, all the times I'd let my mom's behavior slide because it was easier than confronting her. And I realized something. This wasn't just about my mom anymore. This was about my marriage, my future, and the kind of husband I wanted to be. I couldn't keep letting this happen. I couldn't keep letting my mom hurt Ava and pretending like it wasn't a big deal. It was a big deal, and if I didn't take a stand, I was going to lose the most important person in my life. So I made a decision. I didn't know exactly how I was going to do it, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done letting my mom control the narrative. It was time to stand up for Ava, for us, and make it clear that our relationship wasn't up for debate. After that birthday dinner disaster, I knew things couldn't go on the way they had been. Ava deserved better, and I couldn't keep making excuses. My mom's behavior wasn't just hurting her, it was hurting us. If I wanted to save my marriage, I had to confront my mom. It wasn't a conversation I was looking forward to, but it was one I couldn't avoid anymore. A few days later, I drove to my parents' house alone. Ava offered to come with me, but I told her it was something I needed to do on my own. I could tell she was worried, but she nodded, trusting me to handle it. As I pulled into the driveway, my stomach twisted in knots. This house, the one I grew up in, always felt so familiar and safe. But now, it felt like enemy territory. I sat in the car for a moment, taking a deep breath before finally stepping out. My mom was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters when I walked in. She glanced up and gave me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Ethan," she said, her tone cheerful but guarded. "What a surprise. Is everything okay? Can we talk?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Her smile faltered slightly, but she nodded. "Of course. Let's sit." We moved to the living room, and I sat on the couch while she settled into her favorite armchair. My dad was nowhere to be seen, probably out in the garage or the garden. It was just the two of us, which was exactly how I wanted it. "Mom," I began, "I need to talk to you about Ava." She tilted her head, feigning confusion. "What about her?" I took a deep breath. "The way you treat her. It has to stop." Her expression shifted instantly, her face hardening. "I don't know what you mean," she said, her voice defensive. "I've been nothing but polite to her." "Polite?" I repeated, my voice rising slightly despite my efforts to stay calm. "Mom, you've been making snide comments about her since the day we got married. You dismiss her career, you ignore her dietary preferences, and what you said at my birthday dinner that was unacceptable." She crossed her arms, leaning back in her chair. "I was just joking. You're overreacting." "No, I'm not," I said firmly. You've been disrespecting my wife for years, and I've let it slide because I didn't want to cause a fight. But enough is enough. Ava is my wife, and she's going to be my wife for the rest of my life. You don't have to like her, but you will respect her." As she was apologetic about her, "You're giving me powers here." Her eyes narrowed, and I could see the anger building. "Ethan," she said, her tone sharp, "I'm your mother. I raised you. I sacrificed for you, and I only want what's best for you. Ava isn't it. She's not the right person for you, and deep down you know it." I shook my head, my hands clenched into fists on my lap. "No, Mom, what I know is that Ava makes me happy. She supports me, she loves me, and she's everything I could ever want in a partner. You don't get to decide who's right for me." She let out a bitter laugh. "You're blinded by her. One day, you'll thank me for being honest." That was it. That was the moment I snapped. For the first time in years, I raised my voice. "No, Mom, I won't thank you. Not for this. All you've done is tear her down and make her feel unwelcome. Do you have any idea how much you've hurt her? How much you've hurt me?" Her mouth opened to respond, but I didn't let her. "If you can't accept Ava, if you can't show her the respect she deserves, then you don't get me in your life either. I'm done letting you control this. I'm done choosing between my wife and my mom." There was a long, heavy silence. My heart was pounding, and I could feel my hands shaking, but I didn't back down. For the first time, I stood my ground. Now, my dad appeared in the doorway, looking like he'd just walked into the middle of a storm. "What's going on?" he asked, glancing between the two of us. "Ethan's being ridiculous," my mom snapped, her voice trembling with anger. "He's ungrateful after everything I've done for him." "Ungrateful," I repeated, my voice breaking. "I've always appreciated what you've done for me, Mom, but that doesn't give you the right to treat my wife like she's less than. This isn't negotiable." "Let's all calm down," my dad said, stepping forward as if to mediate. "We're family, we can work this out." But I shook my head. "No, Dad, this isn't about calming down. This is about boundaries, and I'm setting them now." My mom stood up, her face red with fury. "If that's how you feel, then maybe you shouldn't come around anymore," she said, her voice cold. "I won't apologize for trying to protect you." I stared at her, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. "I'm not asking you to protect me. I'm asking you to respect me and my wife. If you can't do that, then, yeah, maybe we do need some space." Without another word, she stormed out of the room, leaving me and my dad standing there in silence. He looked at me, his expression a mix of worry and sadness. "Ethan," he started, but I cut him off. "I'm sorry, Dad, but this isn't negotiable." I walked out of the house that day feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. It wasn't easy, and I knew it wasn't over, but I had taken the first step. I had stood up for Ava and for us. The days after my confrontation with my mom were difficult, to say the least. I didn't expect her to take it well, but I also didn't expect the fallout to spread as quickly as it did. It was like she had been waiting for a moment like this, a chance to make herself the victim. It started with a few texts from my cousins. Messages like, "Hey, I heard what happened. You should really apologize to Aunt Linda. She's been so upset," and "Family's all we have, Ethan. Don't let some argument ruin that." Some even tried to guilt trip me. "You only get one mom. Do you really want this on your conscience?" It wasn't just the cousins either. My aunts got involved too. I got calls where they'd gently suggest, "Maybe Ava's been influencing you too much. Your mom just wants what's best for you, sweetie. She's only looking out for you." It didn't take long to realize what was happening. My mom had been busy spinning her version of the story, and unsurprisingly, I was the villain. According to her, I was an ungrateful son who had disrespected the woman who raised me, all because my wife had poisoned me against her. That word, poisoned, came up a lot. I tried to stay calm and not let it get to me, but it wasn't easy. Ava noticed how tense I was every time my phone buzzed with another message. One night, after I put my phone on silent and tossed it onto the coffee table, she finally asked, "Is it about your mom?" I nodded. "She's been talking to everyone, making me look like the bad guy." Ava's face fell. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. If I hadn't..." I cut her off immediately. "Ava, stop. This isn't your fault." "But it feels like it is," she said, her voice quiet. "If I wasn't in the picture, none of this would be happening. You wouldn't have to deal with this." I reached for her hand, holding it tightly. "You are not the problem here. My mom's behavior is the problem. She's the one who refuses to accept you, and that's on her, not you. You're my wife, Ava. You're my family now. You're my priority." She gave me a small, uncertain smile, but I could tell she was still carrying a lot of guilt. I hated that my mom's actions had made her feel this way, like she didn't belong, like she was the cause of all this drama. That's when I realized we needed to take a step back. The constant texts and calls from my extended family, the passive-aggressive messages my mom started sending, it was too much. It wasn't fair to Ava, and honestly, it wasn't fair to me either. One evening, as we were having dinner, I brought it up. "I think we need some space from my parents," I said, looking across the table at her. "At least for a little while." "Yeah." There was a big conversation between us, and we stayed up late that night. She hesitated. Are you sure? I don't want to come between you and your family. You're not, I said firmly. This isn't about choosing sides, it's about protecting our peace. Right now, my mom's behavior is toxic, and I can't let it keep affecting us. I think it's best if we go low contact for a while. Ava nodded slowly. Okay, if you think that's what's best, I'm with you. It wasn't an easy decision, but it felt like the right one. I stopped responding to the texts and calls from my extended family, and I told my mom directly that I needed some space. She didn't take it well. In fact, she doubled down on the passive aggressiveness. She'd send messages like, I guess I just don't matter to you anymore, or don't forget who's always been there for you when this all falls apart. I tried not to let it bother me, but sometimes it did. It's hard to distance yourself from someone who's been such a big part of your life, even when you know it's for the best. But every time I started to doubt my decision, I reminded myself why I was doing this. For Ava, for our marriage, for our happiness. In the weeks that followed, Ava and I started to feel a sense of calm that we hadn't felt in a long time. Without the constant stress of dealing with my mom's negativity, we had more time to focus on each other. We went on more walks, cooked meals together, and even started planning a weekend getaway, something we hadn't done in ages. One night, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, Ava leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "Thank you." "For what?" I asked, genuinely confused. "For choosing me," she said softly, "for standing up for me." I wrapped my arm around her and kissed the top of her head. Always. But even as things got better for us, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness every now and then. I missed the good parts of my relationship with my mom, the times when she was kind and supportive, before everything became so complicated. I didn't want to lose her completely, but I also knew I couldn't let her back into my life until she was willing to change. For now, though, I was focused on Ava and the life we were building together. My mom's approval didn't define our marriage. What mattered was that we loved each other, supported each other, and faced life's challenges as a team. And that's exactly what we were, a team, stronger than ever. A few weeks after we decided to go low contact with my parents, I got a text from my younger sister, Rachel. It simply said, "Hey, can we talk? I've been thinking about everything that's happened, and I just want to check in on you." Rachel is 28, 6 years younger than me, and we've always had a good relationship. Growing up, I was her older brother who helped her with homework and teased her just enough to make her roll her eyes. But as we got older, our conversations became deeper. She had a way of cutting through the noise and getting to the heart of things. If anyone could understand what I was going through, it was her. I texted her back right away and suggested we meet for coffee. The next day, we found ourselves at a cozy little cafe we used to visit when we were younger. Rachel showed up wearing one of her usual oversized sweaters and a determined expression. We ordered our drinks, and as soon as we sat down, she leaned forward. "Ethan," she started, "I just want you to know that I'm proud of you." That caught me off guard. Proud of me? For what? "For standing up to Mom," she said, her voice soft but firm. I know it wasn't easy. I've seen how she can be. Hearing her say that felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For so long, I'd felt like I was the only one who saw how difficult my mom could be. "So, you've noticed it too?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Rachel let out a small, dry laugh. "Of course I have. Ethan, I've felt smothered by Mom my entire life. She has this way of making you feel like you owe her everything, like you're not allowed to make your own choices because she knows what's best. It's exhausting." I nodded, surprised by how much her words mirrored my own feelings. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" She shrugged. "I guess I didn't think it would change anything. And honestly, I didn't want to be the one to rock the boat. But when I heard what happened between you and Mom, it gave me hope. Seeing you take a stand made me realize that I don't have to keep putting up with her behavior either." Her words hit me hard. For so long, I'd felt like the bad guy for setting boundaries with my mom. But hearing Rachel say that she felt relieved, even inspired by what I did, made me see things differently. Maybe I wasn't being selfish or ungrateful. Maybe I was just doing what was necessary to protect my own happiness. And now, hers too. "I just wish it didn't have to come to this," I admitted, staring down at my coffee cup. "I don't want to lose her, Rachel, but I can't let her keep treating Ava the way she has." Rachel reached across the table and put her hand on mine. "You're doing the right thing, Ethan. Mom needs to understand that her behavior has consequences. And honestly, Ava is amazing. She doesn't deserve the way Mom's been treating her. Neither of you do." I felt a lump in my throat at her words. It wasn't just about validation. It was about finally feeling like someone in my family truly understood. "Thanks, Rachel," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "That means a lot." Over the next few weeks, Rachel started including Ava and me in smaller family gatherings, ones that didn't involve my mom. She'd invite us over for dinner or suggest we all go out for brunch. It was refreshing to spend time with family without the underlying tension that usually came with it. Ava, who had been hesitant at first, began to relax around Rachel. It was like we were finally starting to rebuild some of the connections that had been strained for so long. One evening, after a casual dinner at Rachel's apartment, I stayed behind to help her clean up while Ava chatted with one of Rachel's friends in the living room. As we loaded dishes into the dishwasher, Rachel turned to me and said, "You know, Ethan, you've always been the strong one." I raised an eyebrow. Me? Strong? That's not how I'd describe myself. She smiled. "I mean it. You've always been the one to take on the hard stuff. Dealing with mom, keeping the peace. But now you're using that strength in a different way. You're standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. That's real strength." Her words stayed with me long after we left her apartment that night. For so long, I'd been focused on how much my mom's behavior had hurt Ava and me. But now I was starting to see the bigger picture. My mom's need for control hadn't just affected me, it had shaped our entire family dynamic. And by setting boundaries, I wasn't just protecting my marriage, I was breaking a cycle that had gone on for far too long. It wasn't easy, and I knew it wouldn't get easier overnight. But with Rachel's support, I felt more confident in my decision. I was starting to see how much control my mom had over my life, and how much freer I felt without it. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was reclaiming my life. And I wasn't doing it alone. I had Ava, who stood by me even when things got tough. And now, I had Rachel, who reminded me that I wasn't the only one who saw things for what they really were. Together, we were moving forward, one step at a time. It had been months since the confrontation with my mom. Months of limited contact, unanswered texts, and a silence that, at times, felt deafening. For a long time, I wasn't sure if we'd ever speak again. Part of me was okay with that. I had drawn a line in the sand for the sake of my marriage, and I didn't regret it. But another part of me, the son who still loved his mom despite everything, wondered if we could ever find a way back to each other. Then, one day, out of the blue, I got a message from her. It wasn't one of her usual passive-aggressive texts. It was short and surprisingly vulnerable. "Ethan, I miss you. Can we talk?" I stared at my phone for what felt like forever. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to avoid reopening old wounds, but another part of me, the part that still believed in second chances, knew I had to see this through. Next avoided my name. I texted her back, suggesting we meet for lunch at a cafe near my place. To my surprise, she agreed without argument. When the day came, I was nervous. I wasn't sure what to expect. Would she actually apologize, or was this just another attempt to manipulate the situation? I told myself to keep my expectations low, but deep down, I hoped for the best. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting at a small table by the window. She looked different, smaller, somehow. She didn't have that usual air of confidence that made her seem larger than life. When she saw me, she smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile I was used to. It was hesitant, almost uncertain. "Hi, Ethan," she said as I sat down. "Hi, Mom," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. For a few minutes, we made small talk. The weather, how work was going, the usual filler. But then she took a deep breath and said, "Ethan, I need to say something." I nodded, waiting. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how I've treated Ava and how it's affected you. And you're right, I've been unfair. I was so focused on what I thought was best for you that I didn't see how much I was hurting you. I'm sorry." Hearing those words felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest. For the first time, it felt like she was truly acknowledging the pain she'd caused, but I also knew this couldn't be the end of the conversation. "Thank you for saying that, Mom," I said, "but it's not just about me. It's about Ava. She's my wife, and she's a part of my life now. I need you to respect her, not just for my sake, but for hers." She nodded slowly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'll try," she said. "I can't promise it'll be easy, but I'll try." "Mom," I said, leaning forward, "this isn't negotiable. If there's any more disrespect, any more comments or behavior that makes Ava feel unwelcome, I won't have a choice but to step away again. Permanently." Her face fell at my words, but she didn't argue. "I understand," she said quietly. "I don't want to lose you, Ethan." I sat back, letting out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It wasn't a perfect resolution, and I could tell she still harbored some resentment, but it was a step, a small step toward rebuilding something that had been broken for a long time. As the weeks went by, I noticed small changes in my mom's behavior. She started texting me occasionally, asking how Ava and I were doing. When she invited us over for dinner, she made an effort to accommodate Ava's dietary preferences. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments where her tone was a little sharp, or her comments a little pointed, but it was progress. Ava was cautious at first. She didn't want to get her hopes up, and I didn't blame her. But over time, she started to see the effort my mom was making, however small it might have been. It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was enough to give us a glimmer of hope. Through all of this, Ava and I grew closer. The challenges we'd faced together had forced us to communicate more openly and support each other in ways we hadn't before. I learned to be more present, more protective, and more intentional in showing her how much she meant to me. She, in turn, showed me patience and grace, even when things were at their worst. One evening, Rachel invited us over for dinner. It was a small gathering, just the three of us and a couple of her friends. The atmosphere was warm and relaxed. a stark contrast to the tension that usually filled family gatherings. As we sat around Rachel's dining table, laughing and sharing stories, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. Ava was smiling, her laughter filling the room, and Rachel was her usual bubbly self, keeping the conversation lively. At one point, Ava leaned over to me and whispered, "This feels nice." "It does," I agreed, squeezing her hand under the table. In that moment, I realized how far we'd come. Things weren't perfect, and they might never be, but we were stronger now, stronger as individuals and stronger as a couple. We'd faced challenges, set boundaries, and fought for our peace. And in the end, it brought us closer together. As the evening wound down, Rachel brought out a tray of homemade brownies, and we all sat around the table, enjoying the sweetness of the moment, both literally and figuratively. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we were exactly where we were meant to be, and that was enough.